Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Show. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson. We are talking today about something that I think applies to speakers at all levels of your business. We are talking about influence. And I think there's no better person for me to interview than the one and only Bob Burg. Welcome, my friend.
Wow, the one and only. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to have you back on the show today. You know, you are one of just the nicest guys I know.
Oh.
And I'd love you to kind of define for me the difference between being nice and being an influencer.
Well, whether there's a difference or not, and there is, but I would say it's more that being nice alone doesn't necessarily translate into influence. And, I think a lot of times when people, especially if they hear the term or the title of the book, The Go-Giver, and they think, oh, well, just be nice and everything will happen. And that's magical. Right. That's not real world.
Okay.
And so now being nice, first of all, in terms of helping you to be an influencer, being nice is a great thing, both in terms of it's just and first of all, let's just say, nice isn't necessarily the same as kind, first of all. So let's go, someone can act nice in order to get what they want or manipulate another person. Doesn't mean they're kind. But I think that's the context you're using it in. So let's just say nice and kind equal one another. Mm-hmm. It's great to be nice because first, it's just the right way to be. But secondly, it's easier to be successful. It's easier to influence others when you're nice. Let's face it, by and large, most people would rather do business with, be in relationship with, be led by, buy from, what have you, someone who's nice as opposed to someone who's nasty. So certainly it helps in the process, but it's not enough to be influential. It's not enough. Being nice isn't enough to be influential or successful. And I think I can say that with confidence, Jane, only because all of us, you and I and everyone listening, we all know people who we would describe as being simply nice people, who we would also have to describe as being simply broke people, and we'd have to describe as not being necessarily very influential, even though they're nice. So nice doesn't necessarily translate into influence. Having influence, being successful in whatever way you determine to be successful, is a matter of doing the correct things in the success process or the influence process that allows a person to be influential, that allows a person to be successful.
Okay, say more about that. I want to know your definition of an influencer.
Okay, so can I define the word influence and take it from there? And then we can just say an influencer is someone who has or is able to be. So on a very, very basic level, influence can be defined as the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. That's influence by definition. Now, it's the definition, but I don't in any way believe that that's the essence of influence.
Okay.
The essence of influence is pull as opposed to push, as in the age-old question, how far can you push a rope? And the answer is not very far, at least not very fast or very effectively, which is why great influencers don't push. You never hear people say, wow, that David or that Susan, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people. No, she's influential. She has a lot of pull with people. And that's what influence is. It's pull. It's an attraction. Great influencers attract people first to themselves and then and only then to their ideas. So the question is how does one be an influencer? Well, they learn to attract others to themselves, to their ideas. How? Well, this is where the law of influence from the original Go Giver book comes in. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. This does not mean that you're a doormat or that you're self-sacrificial or that you're a martyr. It simply means you understand on a not just an intellectual level, but on a heart level, what I believe was Dale Carnegie's underlying premise in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, Jane. And this is where he wrote that ultimately people do things for their reasons, not our reasons.
Right.
So the powerful influencer, the effective influencer, what we would call the genuine influencer, ask themselves questions to make sure that their focus is in the right place on the other person. So they might ask themselves, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, with their needs, their wants, their desires? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? What problems am I helping them to solve? What benefits am I helping them to attain that they see as being of value? And when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another human being into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment as opposed to trying to depend on some type of compliance, which, at best is unsustainable, and at worst will just turn people off so much they'll avoid you at all costs.
So you take in kind of two ideas, one of being an influencer and one of being a go-giver, and you've brought them together for, this isn't even your latest book though, is it? The Go-Giver Influencer?
It's
title,
the
right?
latest. Yeah, indeed, perfect. Yeah, it's the latest in the Go Giver series, and then I have a book that's a how-to book upon which was sort of based, which is called Adversaries into Allies.
Yes. Adversaries into allies. Okay. And walk us through a little bit about who your market is and kind of what your transitions have been with each book. Now you've landed at influence, but really have always kind of been in the sales world. Just kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. Well, the original one that John David Mann and I did, and John, of course, is the brilliant writer of the team. I mean, he's a wonderful storyteller. You know me, Jane. I'm a how-to person. I'm step one, step two, step three. I'm boring, but
me too.
And so the first one, the Go Giver, the first parable in the series, that was really for the entrepreneur and salesperson.
Okay.
And, Joe, the protagonist, the protege in the story, he was a salesperson trying to hit his third quarter quota, who came to understand that nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. And so, so it was really all about shifting your focus from getting to giving, which when we say that in that context, it simply means constantly, consistently providing value to others. And as a salesperson, that's the key in terms of, of how you need to do it.
Yeah.
The next book was The Go Giver Leader. Now, personally, I don't in any way consider myself a leadership authority, and I'm not. But it was the next natural progression of the book because a lot of leaders utilize the original book, okay, and it was, well, what would Pindar? He was the main mentor, in the story. What would he say about, the go-giver in terms of leadership?
Right.
And so, we did a book in that regard for leadership. And then the next one was, okay, there's such a call for influence, being able to move people to certain ideas, but doing it in the right way. Okay. These days, especially you see political discussion online, but anywhere. And it used to be when people disagree politically, it was, I'm right, you're wrong, which, still isn't great, but it was doable. I'm right, you're wrong. Now it's, I'm right, you're evil. Okay.
Mm,
And people are not, they're arguing, they're screaming, they're yelling, whether online or offline. They're not influencing. They're not
right.
moving anyone to to a different idea.
Right.
And so, although this book, The Go Giver Influencer, is still a business book, it's not about politics. John and I both wanted to now kind of go between leadership and entrepreneurship and say, okay, what does success really come down to? It comes down to influence,
Mm-hmm.
being able to genuinely and effectively move people in a benevolent way that builds everyone. And so we've kind of moved that way. And so is the audience different? I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like the audience is still the salesperson, the entrepreneur, and the leader,
Mm-hmm.
but when is it not? But then we also, then we'll hear about people who bring it home, who got the book based on their work, and then bring it home and they use it as a family study thing too. So we're always delighted, when we hear that.
This is a nice example, though, of when you pick a lane and you pull people into your fan base, then you can kind of take them with you
Yeah.
where you want to
Yeah.
go next and next and next. And when you do outbound approaches, I'm not exactly sure what all you're doing for outbound marketing, but even if you just say we're only going to focus on salespeople because that's been where your bread and butter has lied for a lot of your career, then it gives you that focus. But what comes to you may be things outside of sales, right?
That is such a basic, wonderful foundational principle for success. And I can't tell you how often when people have asked me, about speaking and building a speaking business. And of course, years ago, you and I, because so many people would ask me, and I was having the same conversation with them all the time, you and I did an interview. And so I can't tell you how often I've had people listen to that interview that we
Nice.
did. And for our Go Giver certified speakers, we buy your book, The Wealthy Speaker 2.0, for each and every one of them as part of the time they're there. And of course, we had you in to speak. And so, what do you say? Choose a lane. Understand who you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the person who is most likely to accept your message, benefit by your message, can afford it. I always called it the marketing bridge. Do they need it? Do they want it? And can they afford it? And of course, do they need it is often the least important when it comes to the decision making. And I remember early in my speaking career, Jane, I wanted to work a certain niche market, okay, because I knew they needed it, and I also knew they
Ah,
could afford it, okay, but
right.
they may have needed it, but they didn't want it. I
Mm,
found so much resistance back then to it that finally I made the decision, well, do I want to be a martyr and just keep, going until and hopefully maybe 10 years from now, or do I want to focus on those who not only need it, but they want it? Because if they want it, they can afford it. And at least, by and large.
yeah.
And so no, I went away from that. Now that niche happens to be, it's not one that I do often, but I often get calls from that niche because they've kind of come around to see, yes, they do. Now there's other people who own that niche.
Right.
Okay. They own that niche. I don't, because I didn't pursue that niche. That was a conscious choice. I
Right.
wasn't willing to wait 10 or 15 years for it to come through. But what happens though is, so I getting back to telling people to get a niche for themselves, choose a lane. Yeah, the deeper you go, the more specific you go. Not only do you become a celebrity, positioned as the celebrity go-to person in that niche, but word starts to spread about you. And people who are ancillary to that particular niche, they
Mm-hmm.
begin hearing about you and they end up calling you. And now
Right.
all of a sudden you can decide, all right, is this something where I want to start to focus on this a little bit too? Or is it just going to be one of those where, yeah, every so often I do
Yeah.
those? But
I,
yeah, that's great advice you
I
gave.
think you were most smart to recognize when you're banging your head against the wall and you're not making any headway with an idea. What Frank Kern says, he's got a great podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about find out what is working and triple down on that.
Right, exactly.
What common sense. I mean, geez, why do we sometimes just go after something that's not necessarily working? That is the question.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. Um, can I ask you, let's keep back when you were first starting out. If
Hmm.
you were to give yourself a piece of advice today, what would that be? Maybe something that you would have done earlier on, or what have you? What advice would you give yourself today?
Well, very early on, what I did when I joined the National Speakers Association, I tapped into those who had very successful businesses. I bought the tapes they did that they made. I listened when they spoke. I got around them. I went to the, and I learned and I followed their suggestions and worked very hard. And within a few years, and a couple good breaks that happened along the way, I had a
Yeah.
successful business going. But here's a mistake I made.
Mm.
And this was in the, I'd say mid to late 90s. And it's a
Okay.
lesson that now I'm glad I learned. Back then I wasn't glad I
Sure.
learned it at all. But as the internet began to take hold, and you've got great futurists, Jane, and many of them, people like Dan Burrows and others,
Yes.
just wonderful futurists. They can grab a trend. They just know what's going to, okay, I'm not one of them.
Right.
Okay. I said something like, oh, this internet thing will never actually take off. And I meant it because I'm just one of these people. I'm good at learning systems, following systems, and then teaching systems. You know what I'm saying? But I'm
Yep.
not the one that who invents it. So I didn't want the internet to take off because my business at that time was really, really going well.
Hmm.
And change was not something that was, something I was looking forward to. Now, you hear and there's the what I call the political correctness of the personal development field. And
Okay.
that is certain things that get said that it gets said, but it's just not so, at least not for everyone. Like, for example, people will say change is great, just
Mhm.
love change because change is, well, I hate change. I like to get things right and then stay with it, right? I always say,
Right.
people say, hey, Bob, how's it going? Anything going on different? Nope, everything's the same, only more so. That's fine. I'll
Right.
keep, I'll make things bigger, but I don't want to change. But
Okay.
but life is life, and life is change. And I didn't want to, and I just kind of thought I was too big at the time to have to change. And I found out I was not. And I lost a lot of my business because I just refused to make that change. And a
Oh,
couple of
so
years later,
was it specifically you didn't want to build a website
yeah,
or?
the website, the online marketing and communication, I wanted nothing
Right.
to do with it. I'm kind of
Okay.
a technological I don't know what the fraidy cat, I guess. It's like, and now of course you see me doing so much of it online. So obviously
Yeah.
things have changed, right?
You
But
have
but
changed.
back then,
So you
I
would have
did.
been an earlier adopter.
It would have been that would have been smart of me. And what I
Right.
what I needed to learn, and what I would have told younger Bob Burg is, you may not like to change, and you don't have to like to change. That's not
Yeah.
the issue.
Right.
It You need to do it if what was Immanuel Kant's what do you call it? The something imperative, the if then. If you
Oh
want this
yeah.
result, that the
Then
conditional imperative.
yes.
If you want X, you need to do Y.
Right.
And,
Right.
and and I didn't. So I learned a hard lesson, and I had to rebuild my business a couple of years later, starting from
Wow.
scratch. Yeah. So that would have been that would have been the thing.
Okay, so for those of you who have something, let's say you're a seasoned speaker, you've been doing this a while, and you've been hesitant to adopt something or other. I don't really know that many people who aren't kind of with it, but I do know that there is a lot of new bells and whistles coming at us all the time, Bob, and that can get a little confusing, I think,
Oh,
to people and overwhelming.
intimidating.
Have you picked a lane in terms of like social media, which channels you want to go deeper in? Because I think at some point you can't be good at all things, so you need to
Oh,
kind of choose.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, as far as technology goes, you know that I have a brilliant partner by the name of Kathy Tajanel,
Yes, ma'am.
and she is just a whiz with technology.
Right.
And so she helps me to be able to, she kind of taught me what I needed to know in order to be able to get online. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Right.
so what you need to do, you may not have to take on a business partner. That's not for everybody, but
Hmm.
you need to, if you're really feeling stuck with something, you need to find someone
Right.
who can, so so yeah. Now, as far as social media goes, yes, I agree with you. And I you see these people who are on every social medium, and don't think you have to do that. You don't.
Yeah. It's hard to
Pick
be a good
right.
influencer when you're spread really, really thin.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think you do a very good job on that. And I
Thank you.
probably see you mostly on Facebook and I don't know, maybe LinkedIn and a couple of other things. But
LinkedIn getting more so.
mhm.
My two big ones are Facebook and Twitter.
Okay.
In the last year and a half, I've started to really grow on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then I just talk about being a late adapter. Just in the last year or so, Instagram.
Instagram.
We're
Yeah.
starting to do. But I've and again, while I handle all my social media, nobody answers anything. Every response is from me. I
You.
have people who certainly help me set up and get things on there that I
Sure.
want, so that it takes pressure off of me.
Sure. And I think that we're going to have somebody on to help us with Instagram stories and things
Oh,
like
good.
that because it's not always the easiest thing to get on the bandwagon, but when something is rolling so fastly,
Hmm.
so fast and growing so quickly, we really want to shift our efforts and make sure we're taking advantage of that. Okay.
Hmm.
So back to influence. Let's talk about if you were, how does this translate to a professional speaker who has a talk, a topic, and they want to get it out to people? How does being a go-giver influencer differ from just kind of reaching out to people? Like what would a go-giver influencer be setting their mindset for as they start their day?
Well, the mindset would always be, how does what I'm about to say, do, tweet, post, pin, what have you, how does fill in the
Pin.
blank
Yeah.
add value to this other person?
Mm.
Okay. I mean, that's really
Coming
where it
from a
all
place of service,
really,
honesty.
and not, again, not just because, oh, that's nicey nice and kind
Right.
and wonderful. It's because that's the only way that others are going to respond to you, to do
Mm.
business with you. Right.
Right.
And so there's nothing magical or mystical about why being a go giver, if you will, works. It ties into human nature. It's a more pleasant way of conducting business, sure, but it's
Yeah.
also the most profitable way as well. And so you ask yourselves the questions: how, will this post or will this article that I submit to this particular group,
Hmm.
or would doing a webinar for some of their leaders, or would this or that? What is it that helps build a relationship with this other human being?
Yeah.
Uh, how what is the best way to do that? And if you're focused on how it's going to, and remember, when we talk about adding value to another person,
Hmm.
value, which is defined as the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, post, webinar, what have you, that's so worth so much, that brings so much worth to the other person, that they
Hmm.
would gladly exchange whether it's their money or their time or their energy or their whatever, to involve themselves in this. Value is always in the eyes of the beholder.
Hmm.
So it's not because you think doing X would be great for them and helpful. It's, do they feel that you're doing X for them would be helpful?
So let's transition that to a sales conversation that you
Mm-hmm.
might be having. And I like to take the word sales out of it because a lot of my clients are kind of nervous of, oh, I don't sell very well. So we talk about it, just really getting in there to see whether or not you're a match. Does what they need match up with what it is that you have? Can you talk us through what a sales conversation would start out like for you?
Okay, so would you indulge me in allowing me to redefine selling for those who are
Please.
listening who don't want to feel as though, see,
Please do.
many
Thank you.
people, Jane, and especially speakers who often come from a non-sales background, okay? They have a
Yes.
certain skill set that they have
Right.
that
Right.
they know is of so much value to others, and they want to share that with others,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to get paid for sharing that with others, yet they don't want to sell their products or services. Well,
Right.
I don't think people uh, have a negative feeling about selling. They have a negative feeling about what they think selling is.
Oh,
So
interesting.
many people think of selling, as something you do to someone. But
Mm,
as former NSA member, the late Ron Willingham used to say, selling is something you do for someone. Okay, people think selling is about trying to convince someone to buy something they don't want or need. Well, that's
right.
not selling. That's called being a con artist. And
Mm,
that's not what selling is about. Selling, by definition, Jane, is simply discovering what the other person wants, needs, or desires and helping them to get it. In fact, the old
mm,
English root of the word sell was selan, which meant to give. So
mm.
when you're selling, you're literally giving. Now, some might say, well, okay, Burg, but isn't that just semantics? And I don't think so. And here's why. When you have someone, let's say, on the phone, a potential client on the phone, okay, and you are in the selling process, what exactly, when you're selling, what exactly are you giving them? I suggest you're giving them time,
Mhm.
attention, counsel, education, empathy, and mainly value. So, indeed, you are selling your speaking services, but think of selling as giving. Think of selling as, it's like when people say, well, don't sell, serve. Well, selling is service. Serving is selling. So if we look at this way now, because here's the thing, if you real not you, but if one has a really, really bad feeling about selling and they don't want to admit they're selling, and yet that's exactly what they're having to do, that's going
Right.
to hurt their production.
Right. Well, the first
Because
sale is to yourself, right?
exactly. And if you don't feel as though that is congruent with your values, you're
Right.
not going to be very good at it. So
Right.
I want you to know, yes, you're selling, but when we say selling, you're simply discovering what
Yeah.
they want, need, or desire, and you're helping them to get it.
I love it. And maybe it's a discovery call
Now,
instead of a
this is what,
sales call. We can start
let's,
to
sure.
word that something else. Okay, so
Hmm.
you get a client on the phone, and let's say your client has a sales meeting coming up. So it's
Hmm.
you, Bob Burg, who's on the phone with the client talking about their upcoming sales meeting. And I'm going to assume that you just dive in with some questions. Is that
Yeah, well, the first thing, and again, if we're talking about a cold call, where the person doesn't know us yet, but we do find out that this is the person who's either the decision maker or they're the point person when it comes to a committee, because we need to know that.
mhm,
The first thing is just discovering, once we know they have speakers, again, we're assuming we know all that.
right?
Now we're discovering, what are they looking to accomplish? What's going to be the theme of your upcoming
Event.
conference?
Okay.
Well, the theme is blah 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 blah. That's a
Why?
terrific sounding theme. And
Yeah.
so at the end of this conference, and your people, or your attendees, are walking away and going back into the real world, what are you hoping, based on this theme and the different people who will be presenting, what are you hoping they're going to walk away with and be able to do? Boom. Now you're getting them to tell you. So remember, when you discover the other person's wants, needs, or desires, it's only after you know this that you can then match the benefits of your program with what
Mhm,
they need, want, or desire. So let's say we're talking. Let's just say, in my case, we're talking about, it's a sales conference that
mhm,
we're talking about. Okay, and it's a company that they're in a very commodity based field. So the salespeople, we've kind of find out that the salespeople are often having to sell on low price, and
Right.
they're often complaining that they're not, but the whole thing. And so one of the things I might ask is, when it comes to understanding the immense value that your salespeople are offering, how proficient would you say they are at really, really understanding the magnificence of this product, how much it helps others? Now, sometimes they'll say, well, I think they have a good idea, but but let's say by and large, you're going to hear them say, oh yeah, no, they really know, they love the product, and and then the question I'll usually ask is, well, that's fantastic. Let me ask, when it comes to communicating this
That
immense
value.
value to their
Yes.
prospective customers, how do they do when it comes to that? And practically always, they're going to say, no, they're not. Yeah. Okay.
No good.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great follow-up question, because you already know that they're going to say, no, 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 they don't have a need, understanding the value.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go
Yeah.
deeper. Well, how do they communicate that? That's really good,
Yeah.
Bob.
And remember, this is from Kathy and me kind of going through sales conversations with this and not knowing what the exact question it was. And that's why I want to encourage people listening. If you go through some sales conversations and feel yourself kind of at a loss a couple of times, that's okay. Just
Yeah.
come away with understanding. Jim Pancero, Jim, he's just one of the most
Big sales
fantastic,
guy.
big Jim. Yep.
Both literally and
Literally, and as far as his heart goes. Yeah. He's just
figuratively.
yeah. And Jim wrote a great article in a recent National Speakers Association magazine about learning from the no's. That when you get a no, there are questions you can ask, and there are ways you can kind of go through and do an assessment of yourself in a sense. And so, what I did right, what did I learn from it? What could I have done? And so, use these the no situations to figure out what you needed to learn and what you needed to know through them. And so from doing this, Kathy and I then got down the questions to ask that made sense for us, for our market, which may not make sense for someone
else may have to massage that question. But starting with the theme of the meeting and talking to them, and ultimately you're trying to get to their pain points, right?
Sure.
You really want to understand where their pain is so that your ideas can be a part of the solution.
Yeah, and you just need to do it gently and tactfully, because if I was to say to this person, well, I'll bet most of your salespeople can't communicate. Yeah.
Right.
No, sure they can. Sure they, you know what I'm saying?
Right, they'd get defensive, right. Yeah. So being able to say it in a way that is the go-giver way. So let's circle back to influence and what you consider to be the 5 secrets of genuine influence. What would those be? Well, we may have said them, we may have brushed over them before. We'll go a little deeper.
Well, because they all kind of come into play most of the time. So the first one is mastering your emotions, controlling your emotions. And so when you're in a conversation, and here's the thing, Jane. I mean, we're all human beings, and we are emotion driven, right? We like to think we're logical, and to a certain extent we are, but we're pretty emotion based. We all make emotional decisions, and then we back up those decisions with logic. We rationalize, which means we tell ourselves rational lies, and we operate emotionally. So what we've got to do though is understand, and we're not saying to deny your emotions or to forgo your emotions. Just make sure you're controlling your emotions, that you're the master of your emotions. They're not the master of you. One of my great friends, Dondi Scumaci, one of my mentors, great leadership speaker, she says, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, and one of the ways this happens in a sales call, or you can call it a discovery call, or however you want to frame it, is that when this person has a question or an objection, or they say, well, we don't use outside speakers and blah, blah, when you feel your and actually practice in advance.
Yes.
Because you're going to hear those. So you might as well get used to it, practice in advance, so that you default right into calm and, what have you, and just respond to it in the way that you need to respond to it, as opposed to getting defensive, which will cause you to go into argument mode and things like that. So make sure you're the master of your emotions. The next is to step into the other person's shoes. Now, that's an old saying, right? We've all heard it. It's kind of trite. Step into the other person's shoes. Sure. You think, well, it sounds pretty easy until you realize that, most of us have different size feet. So literally, we can't step into the other person's shoes. Figuratively, we can't step into their head. Right. We don't know what's going on with them. We don't know what's going on with their association or corporation. We don't know what kind of pressure is on them to do this or that. We don't know necessarily, what announcement is coming that's going to change their entire bit. We don't know. And the only way we can know is by asking questions and then listening. And as we say in the story, not just listening with your ears. That's the surface listening so many people do. It's, listening in order to speak. It's letting them get in their 2 cents so that we can get in our 10 cents.
Right.
What we want to do instead is listen with our ears, but also listen with our eyes, listen with our posture, listen with the back of our neck, we say. And what that really means is put everything into listening and understand. And at that point, now you're actually able to step into their shoes. Okay.
Nice. Okay. So master emotions, step into their shoes.
Yeah. The third is set the proper frame. And this is so vitally important because a frame is basically the foundation from which everything else evolves.
Okay.
So when you've set the proper frame, you're 90% of the way there. And this can be when it comes to just when they answer the phone, it's utilizing the correct language so you don't turn that person off, but they're glad they spoke with you. I actually like to say, do you have a really quick minute, or have I caught you at a really awful time?
Right.
Okay. And people say, well, what? But aren't you just giving them the chance to say, yes, I'm busy, get off the phone? Well, here's the thing. If they are busy right now, they're going to resent the fact, right, that you just went into the thing. If they are busy and you ask as you just did, they're much likely going to be much more open to you now scheduling an appointment. And what's probably going to happen is they're going to say, well, I have a quick minute. What can I do for you?
Right.
Now you can go into your, and so it's just setting the frame properly.
Okay. Set the frame.
Yeah.
Number 4.
Is to communicate with tact and empathy. My dad has always defined tact as the language of strength. And I've always enjoyed that definition because it takes a strong person a lot of times to not just get emotional and jump at what this other person says or send back that quick email or what have you. And, tact is really communicating an idea, Jane, to someone in such a way, an idea they may not ordinarily be open to, but doing so in such a way that rather than they're being defensive toward you and resistant to your idea, they're open to you and they're open to your idea. And that's very important.
I love that.
And then there's let go of having to be right. And what we mean by that is not that you don't want to be right or that you're not going to try and be right. It simply means let go of the attachment to having to be right. And when we do this, we open ourselves to going into learner's mode.
Yes.
And we can actually learn and know more. Okay. This is opposite of the person who, their mind's made up, don't confuse them with the facts. And they can't know any more than they know right now. And typically people who are so stuck in an idea that they will not move, they typically don't even know, a lot of times what they think they know isn't true. Right. And so be open to other ideas and be open to not being 100% right and be open to knowing this person may have information you don't know. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It means you're simply open to learning. And when you do this, again, not only are you in a position where you do know more, so your chances of being right are even higher, but the person you're dealing with understands that they're dealing with a person who's simply seeking the truth rather than just looking to defend a position or
Right.
be right at all cost, including their own cost.
Right. Right. Well, those are 5 terrific secrets of genuine influence. And Bob, you have taken us. It's a really good thing to know about. I recommend the Go Giver to everyone because it's a
Oh,
really
thank you.
great opportunity for you to shift the way you think about showing up for a sale. From what can I go and get to what can I go and give and how can I be of service, and that's how you operate in the world every day. Bob, if
Thank
people
you.
want to know more about this, where should they go?
They can probably the best place is just thegogiver.com. The
Okay.
Go Giver without the hyphen.
Okay, great. Thegogiver.com. Well, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with our listeners today. I appreciate that, and I'm so glad that you were on the show.
My pleasure. Always love speaking with our Jane. You do so much for all of us, and you just bring so much value to the lives of everyone you touch. Thank you.
You're so kind. Well, thank you for you who are listening in. And if you have liked and appreciated our message today, please go on over to iTunes and make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and give us a rating and a review so that we can see our stats going up and up. And we really appreciate you doing that. And with that, we will say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speakers Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit, and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, Wealthy Speakers.